The drive to my father's neighborhood always filled me with a sense of serenity. Neat houses lined the winding streets, their lawns trimmed to perfection. My father had chosen this place for retirement after 30 years of dedicated service in law enforcement. He wanted peace, simplicity, and morning coffee on his porch without the weight of a badge. I pulled into his driveway on Friday afternoon. The weekend stretched before us with no plans besides conversation and home-cooked meals. My father stood from his porch chair when he saw my car, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile. He did not rush. He never rushed. Years of crisis management had taught him the value of measured movements. "You made good time," he said as I stepped from the car. He embraced me briefly, then motioned toward the second chair on the porch. "I have fresh coffee inside. Would you like some?" I nodded, watching him disappear into the house. The neighborhood was quiet, almost unnaturally so. No children played despite the perfect weather. Few neighbors walked their dogs or tended their gardens. The atmosphere felt oddly sterile. My father returned with 2 mugs. As we sat in comfortable silence, a white SUV with Community Patrol stenciled on the side crept down the street. The driver slowed considerably as he passed my father's house, eyeing us with undisguised suspicion. "Third time they have driven past today," my father remarked without looking up from his book. "Community Patrol?" I asked. "Is that new?" "The HOA hired them 6 months ago. They like to make their presence known." Before I could ask more questions, our next-door neighbor, Mrs. Abernathy, hurried across her lawn toward us. She was a small woman with anxious eyes who constantly adjusted her cardigan. She lowered her voice as she reached the edge of our yard. "Jack, I would be careful about sitting out here too long," she said to my father. "The enforcement squad has been writing people up for loitering in public spaces." Ridiculous, I know, but they take it very seriously. My father thanked her with a polite nod, but did not appear concerned. Mrs. Abernathy retreated to her house, glancing nervously at the SUV that had circled back around. "Enforcement squad?" I asked when she was gone. "Just busybodies with clipboards," my father said. "The HOA president fancies himself a general in a suburban war against individuality." As evening approached, I noticed several people in matching blue polos gathered at the end of the street. They pointed at various houses, including ours, making notes and speaking in hushed tones. The weight of their judgment hung in the air like humidity before a storm. "Does that not bother you?" I asked my father. He turned a page in his book. "I have dealt with far worse than neighborhood politics." That night, as I unpacked in the guest room, I could not shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with this neighborhood. The perfect lawns and identical mailboxes suddenly seemed less like community pride and more like enforced conformity. I watched from the window as the patrol car made another slow pass, its headlights sweeping across my father's front porch like searchlights. I did not know then that by Monday, that same porch would become a battleground, and my quiet, unassuming father would remind everyone what real authority looked like. The confrontation began at 7:15 the next morning. My father was an early riser, a habit from decades of pre-dawn shifts. He sat on the porch with his first coffee and the newspaper while the neighborhood still slumbered. I was in the kitchen scrambling eggs when I heard the vehicle doors slam. Glancing through the window, I saw 2 men in tactical pants and blue polos marching up our walkway. Their postures radiated unearned authority. Neither smiled. Both carried clipboards and wore what appeared to be communication devices on their belts. I moved closer to the window, spatula in hand, as they approached my father. "Sir, you have been observed loitering in this public-facing area multiple times," the taller one declared without introduction. "We need to see identification and verify your community status." My father lowered his newspaper slowly. "Good morning to you too," he said evenly. "May I ask who you are and what authority you are operating under?" The second man stepped forward, pulling out a small digital camera. "We are community enforcement officers with the Oak Ridge HOA. Repeated violations of community standards have been logged at this address." "Officers?" My father's eyebrow raised slightly. That suggests law enforcement credentials. Do you have badges or identification showing your authority? Their demeanor shifted from officious to aggravated. The taller one spoke into his radio. Jenkins, log another noncompliance interaction at 1452 Maple, resident refusing to provide identification. My father remained seated, utterly calm. I am not refusing anything. I am asking you to identify yourselves and clarify your authority on my private property. The second man aimed his camera at my father. Your porch is considered a public-facing space under HOA Regulations Section 12.3. That was when I decided to intervene. I set down the spatula, grabbed my phone, and stepped outside. I am recording this interaction, I announced, holding up my phone. Please state your names and positions for the record. The effect was immediate. Both men straightened, glancing at each other with uncertainty. This is an official HOA compliance check, the taller one stated, though his voice had lost some conviction. My father stood now, his full height impressive despite his age. I will ask one more time. Please leave my property unless you can produce proper credentials authorizing you to demand identification from homeowners. The shorter man stepped back slightly. We will be filing a formal complaint, he said, his tone more defensive than authoritative. You do that, my father replied. In writing, please, with your full names and your specific allegations. They retreated to their vehicle, speaking urgently into their radios. I continued filming until they drove away. My father turned to me, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. I believe those eggs might be burning. He was right. The kitchen had filled with smoke, the forgotten breakfast ruined. But something more concerning had begun to smolder, a confrontation that would not end with a simple retreat. Do they always act like that? I asked, scraping charred eggs into the trash. They have become progressively more aggressive, my father said. But this is the first time they have demanded identification. It seems they are expanding their self-appointed powers. That afternoon, neighbors walked by slowly, stealing glances at our porch. Several nodded respectfully to my father, while others hurried past with averted eyes. The community patrol vehicle circled every 30 minutes like clockwork. They are trying to intimidate us, I said. My father shook his head. No, they are trying to intimidate me. They see an older man living alone and presume vulnerability, he smiled faintly. A miscalculation on their part. I had no idea just how significant a miscalculation it was about to become. What the self-appointed neighborhood patrol did not know, what almost nobody in that community knew, was exactly who they were attempting to bully. My father, Jack Mercer, had never been one to throw around titles or demand special treatment. Most neighbors knew him only as the quiet man with the impeccable lawn who waved politely but kept to himself. They did not know he had served 30 years in law enforcement, rising through the ranks from patrol deputy to detective, then lieutenant, and finally sheriff of Westlake County. They did not know he had led the regional drug task force that dismantled 3 major trafficking operations. They had no idea he had negotiated with armed hostage-takers, coordinated disaster response during the Great Flood of 2012, and received the Medal of Valor for rescuing 4 children from a burning building. My father never displayed his commendations. He kept no photos of himself in uniform. His badge stayed in a drawer except when needed. He had moved to Oak Ridge Estates 3 years ago seeking anonymity after a lifetime of public service. People treat you differently when they know, he once told me. They either expect special favors or they walk on eggshells. I just want to be a regular neighbor. That desire for normalcy had prevented him from correcting the HOA when problems first emerged. He had attended meetings at the beginning, offering measured suggestions about community safety based on his extensive experience. But the new HOA president, a former middle manager named Victor Harmon, had repeatedly cut him off. We have professionals handling security matters, Harmon had declared dismissively during one meeting, unaware of the irony in his statement. After that, my father stopped attending. He paid his dues on time, maintained his property meticulously, and chose to live and let live. But the HOA had become increasingly restrictive under Harmon's leadership. New rules appeared monthly. Specific garbage can placement requirements, approved plant lists, constraints on holiday decorations, limitations on how long one could sit on one's own porch. The enforcement squad had materialized 6 months earlier. 5 men with no law enforcement background but plenty of tactical gear purchased from sporting goods stores. They began issuing citations, taking photographs of alleged violations and monitoring suspicious behavior. Several elderly residents had received violations for excessive gatherings when their grandchildren visited. A woman recovering from surgery was fined for leaving her trash can at the curb 4 hours too long. A family with a child on the autism spectrum received complaints about disruptive behavior when their son needed outdoor time during a meltdown. My father had observed all of this with growing concern but remained uninvolved. Until now. Until they brought their inflated authority to his doorstep and attempted to intimidate him in his own home. I should have spoken up sooner, he admitted that evening. Sometimes the hardest part of having authority is knowing when to use it. I realized then that a lifetime of crisis management had taught my father extraordinary patience. But that patience had limits, and the HOA enforcement squad was rapidly approaching them. Sunday morning brought clear skies and escalating tension. My father and I had just returned from an early walk when the white SUV swerved into our driveway, blocking my car. 3 men emerged, the 2 from yesterday plus a third, larger man with a shaved head and sunglasses despite the early hour. They moved with exaggerated purpose, spreading out as if executing a tactical operation. The absurdity might have been comical if not for the clear intent to intimidate. "Jack Mercer," the new man called out. "You are in violation of HOA Code Section 12 regarding public loitering, Section 15 regarding compliance with community officers, and Section 23 regarding respect for authority." My father stood perfectly still at the bottom of the porch steps. "And you are currently trespassing on private property," he stated calmly. "I suggest you move your vehicle and present proper identification if you wish to continue this conversation." The man pulled something from his pocket and held it up briefly, a laminated card on a lanyard that resembled a security badge from a shopping mall. "Community Enforcement Division, Chief Officer Daniels. You are under community detainment pending resolution of multiple violations." My father did not move. "Community detainment is not a legal status, Mr. Daniels. You have no authority to detain anyone." Daniels nodded to his companions. "Secure the subject." That was when everything escalated. The shorter man from yesterday lunged forward, reaching for my father's wrist with what appeared to be actual handcuffs. My father, despite being in his 60s, moved with decades of trained precision. He sidestepped the grab, caught the man's wrist, and with minimal effort turned it slightly, effectively stopping the motion without causing pain. "That would be assault," my father said quietly. "I strongly advise against it." I had already pulled out my phone and dialed 911. "Emergency services, what is your emergency?" the dispatcher asked. "3 men are attempting to detain my father on our property," I reported, speaking clearly. "They claim to be HOA security but are attempting physical restraint. We need officers at 1452 Maple Street in Oak Ridge Estates immediately." Daniels was shouting into his radio. "Code 6, resistance at location 4, backup requested." My father maintained his calm hold on the man's wrist. "There is no Code 6, Mr. Daniels. There is no legitimate security protocol here. There is only trespassing and attempted false imprisonment, both of which are actual crimes." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. The real authorities were responding with impressive speed. Daniels looked suddenly uncertain, the reality of the situation perhaps dawning on him. "Release him," he ordered my father, pointing at his colleague. "When you back away to a safe distance," my father replied evenly. The cruisers arrived within minutes, 3 of them blocking the street. Real deputies emerged, hands near their weapons, assessing the tense tableau on our lawn. "What is going on here?" the lead deputy demanded, approaching cautiously. Daniels immediately adopted an officious tone. "Officer, we are conducting community enforcement." This resident became aggressive during a standard compliance check. The deputy looked skeptical. "Community enforcement, under whose authority?" "Oak Ridge HOA Security Division," Daniels declared. "We have full authorization to maintain community standards." My father had released the man's wrist and now reached slowly into his back pocket. "Deputy Carson," he said, recognizing the officer. "Good to see you." He withdrew his wallet and flipped it open, revealing the badge and ID card he rarely displayed. "Sheriff Mercer, these gentlemen were just attempting to place me in community detainment on my own property." The transformation was instantaneous. Deputy Carson's eyes widened, then narrowed. The other deputies straightened perceptibly. "Sheriff," Carson acknowledged with newfound formality, "are you pressing charges?" Daniels had gone pale, his sunglasses now removed, revealing darting, panicked eyes. "There must be some misunderstanding," he began. "We were not informed." "That was intentional," my father cut in. "I value my privacy in retirement. However, I do not value being handcuffed in my front yard by unauthorized individuals impersonating law enforcement." What followed was a flurry of activity. The three HOA officers were separated and questioned. Their vehicle was searched, revealing a collection of equipment designed to mimic police gear, including batons, pepper spray, and more handcuffs. None of it legal for their use. As they were placed in the back of patrol cars, not under arrest yet, but definitely not free to leave, I stood beside my father. "You could have mentioned your former position on day one," I said. He shook his head slightly. "And missed the opportunity to see just how far they would take their little power trip. Sometimes people need enough rope to entangle themselves thoroughly before they understand the consequences of their actions." The sheriff's department vehicles remained for hours, taking statements and photographs. Neighbors emerged from their homes, watching in stunned silence as the self-appointed neighborhood patrol faced real authority for the first time. This was only the beginning of their problems. The next morning, my father made a single phone call to the county administration office. By noon, we had accessed every public record related to Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association for the past 5 years. What should have been mundane documentation revealed a disturbing pattern of escalating control and questionable financial decisions. My father spread the papers across his dining room table, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose as he methodically reviewed each document. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a budget allocation from 18 months earlier. $50,000 for community security enhancements approved in a special session. I leaned closer. Was that a scheduled meeting? According to the bylaws, special sessions require notification to all homeowners at least 14 days in advance. He shuffled through more papers. No record of notification exists. We continued our investigation throughout the day. 3 neighbors, emboldened by the previous day's events, came forward with their own stories and documents. Mrs. Abernathy brought carefully preserved letters showing escalating fines for unspecified violations. Mr. Jenkins from 2 streets overshared photographs of the patrol monitoring his teenage son's basketball practice. The Hernandez family provided copies of threatening notices regarding their approved but suddenly unapproved garden modifications. "They changed the approved plant list after we had already installed everything," Mrs. Hernandez explained. "Then fined us $200 per week until we removed the non-conforming vegetation." By Tuesday evening, a disturbing picture had emerged. The HOA, led by Victor Harmon and his inner circle, had systematically constructed a pseudo-governmental structure designed to control every aspect of neighborhood life. Board meeting minutes showed fewer and fewer homeowners in attendance as the meetings were rescheduled without notice, moved to inconvenient locations, or limited to board members only for vague emergency reasons. Financial records revealed that the security team members, none of whom had law enforcement backgrounds, were receiving substantial compensation. Daniels, the self-appointed chief officer, was being paid nearly $70,000 annually from HOA dues. The patrol vehicle, tactical equipment, and custom uniforms had cost residents over $100,000 in the past year alone. Most concerning were the enforcement policies themselves, buried in addendums and special rules never properly ratified by the community. They included provisions for community detention, electronic monitoring of problem properties, and escalating financial penalties that could result in property liens without court approval. "This is not just overreach," my father said quietly. "This borders on criminal conspiracy and fraud." He made another call, this time to the district attorney's office. He explained the situation without mentioning his former position, but his detailed knowledge of applicable statutes made his background obvious to the assistant DA who took the call. "Sheriff Mercer," the assistant DA said with clear respect in her voice, "I believe this warrants immediate attention. I will send an investigator tomorrow morning." That evening, my father drafted a formal letter requesting an emergency meeting with the HOA board, citing specific bylaw provisions they could not ignore without openly violating their fiduciary duty. The letter was delivered by courier to each board member's home, ensuring they could not claim ignorance. The response was swift. Victor Harmon himself called within an hour, his voice artificially pleasant but underlined with tension. "Mr. Mercer, this all seems quite unnecessary. If you had concerns about our security protocols, a simple email would have sufficed." "Mr. Harmon," my father replied evenly, "when your security team attempted to physically detain me on my property, they crossed a line from administrative overreach into potential criminal liability. The meeting will proceed as requested, tomorrow at 6 p.m. in the community center. I am afraid several board members have prior commitments." "Then they should cancel them," my father interrupted, his tone hardening slightly. "Unless those commitments involve meeting with their personal attorneys, which I would actually recommend at this point." The line went silent for several seconds. "Very well," Harmon finally responded. 6 p.m. tomorrow." When my father hung up, I noticed a slight smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "You enjoyed that?" I observed. "I spent 30 years dealing with people who abuse power," he replied. "I find no joy in their downfall, but I do appreciate the moment they realize accountability has finally caught up with them." The next day, the county investigator arrived early. Agent Lisa Morales was efficient and thorough, spending hours reviewing our compiled evidence. By afternoon, she had conducted her own interviews with multiple residents and gathered additional documentation directly from county records. "This is one of the most comprehensive cases of HOA overreach I have seen," she admitted, "and I specialize in homeowner association disputes." As 6 p.m. approached, we walked together to the community center. Residents lined the sidewalks, watching curiously. Word had spread quickly. Some nodded respectfully to my father, while others looked anxious, as if witnessing a power struggle whose outcome remained uncertain. The board members were already seated at a long table when we entered, their faces tense. Victor Harmon sat center, flanked by 4 others, including a nervous-looking man I recognized as one of the patrol officers from our confrontation. My father placed his folder of documents on the table. Agent Morales set her official county investigator badge beside it. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. Board members exchanged glances, realizing too late that this was not merely an angry homeowner complaint. "Good evening," my father began calmly. "I believe we have much to discuss about the future of this community." The county courthouse was filled beyond capacity on that Thursday morning. Residents of Oak Ridge Estates occupied most seats, but representatives from neighboring HOA communities had also come to witness the proceedings. Local media positioned themselves strategically around the room, sensing the significance of what was unfolding. 4 of the 7 HOA board members sat together at the defendant's table, including Victor Harmon and the security director, Jeffrey Daniels. Their attorneys looked grim. The evidence compiled against them had grown substantially since our initial discovery. The judge, an older woman with silver hair and piercing eyes, reviewed the documents before her with meticulous attention. When she finally looked up, her expression was severe. This court has reviewed the evidence presented by the district attorney's office regarding the actions of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association Board and its appointed security personnel. The allegations are deeply troubling. She listed the charges methodically: fraud, impersonation of law enforcement officers, unlawful detention, conspiracy, financial misappropriation, and violation of homeowner rights. Each charge seemed to land like a physical blow on the defendants. The district attorney presented the case with clinical precision, displaying financial records, testimonials, and video evidence, including my recording of the confrontation on our lawn. When the security footage from the HOA office revealed board members laughing about teaching the old man on Maple Street a lesson, murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Victor Harmon's attorney attempted to distance his client from the actions of the security team. My client delegated security matters to Mr. Daniels with the understanding that all activities would remain within legal boundaries. The judge appeared unimpressed, and the unauthorized special sessions, the unratified rule changes, the financial allocations without proper homeowner notification, was Mr. Daniels responsible for those as well. The attorney had no compelling response. When it was Daniels' turn to defend himself, his strategy became immediately clear: blame everyone else. I was following the board's instructions, he insisted. Mr. Harmon specifically told us to make examples of problematic residents. This triggered an immediate objection from Harmon's attorney and a heated exchange between the defendants. The judge silenced them with a sharp rap of her gavel. Enough, this court is not interested in watching you blame each other. When my father was called to testify, he walked to the witness stand with the same calm dignity he had shown throughout the ordeal. He did not wear a uniform or display his badge. He was dressed simply in a navy suit with a subtle tie. Please state your name and occupation for the record, the court clerk requested. John Mercer, retired sheriff of Westlake County. A collective intake of breath swept through the courtroom. Many residents were hearing this information for the first time. Victor Harmon's face drained of color. My father's testimony was measured and factual. He described the escalating pattern of intimidation, the attempted detention, and the evidence we had uncovered. He presented everything without emotion or embellishment, allowing the facts to speak for themselves. During cross-examination, Daniel's attorney attempted to paint my father as vindictive, suggesting he had deliberately concealed his law enforcement background to entrap the security team. Sheriff Mercer, the attorney asked, why did you not simply identify yourself as law enforcement when my client first approached you? My father's response was simple. Because in that moment, I was not acting as Sheriff Mercer. I was acting as Jack Mercer, homeowner, who has the same rights as every other citizen to be free from unlawful detention and intimidation in his own home. The judge nodded almost imperceptibly. When all testimony concluded, the judge took only a brief recess before returning with her ruling. This court finds substantial evidence of systemic abuse of power by the Oak Ridge Estates HOA board and its appointed agents. Effective immediately, the current board is dissolved, and the association will be placed under court-appointed receivership pending a full audit and new elections. She addressed the criminal charges separately, finding probable cause to proceed with formal charges against Daniels for impersonating a peace officer and attempted false imprisonment. 3 board members, including Harmon, would face charges of fraud and conspiracy. Communities function on trust and mutual respect, she concluded. When those entrusted with neighborhood governance transform it into a vehicle for personal power, they undermine the very foundation of community living. This court will not tolerate such abuses. As the gavel struck with finality, the tension that had gripped our neighborhood for months finally began to dissipate. Residents exchanged glances of relief and vindication. Some wept quietly. Outside the courthouse, several neighbors approached my father, shaking his hand or embracing him with gratitude. He accepted their thanks with characteristic humility, deflecting praise and emphasizing the courage of those who had come forward with evidence. "Justice is not something that happens automatically," he told a small group gathered around him. "It requires people willing to stand up when it would be easier to look away." As we walked to the car, a reporter approached with microphone extended. "Sheriff Mercer, how does it feel to have taken down a corrupt HOA system?" My father paused briefly. "I did not take down anything. I simply reminded everyone involved what genuine authority looks like. It serves rather than intimidates, protects rather than threatens. The rest took care of itself." 3 weeks passed. Spring had fully blossomed in Oak Ridge Estates, bringing with it a new atmosphere that went beyond just seasonal change. My visit had extended longer than planned, but I wanted to witness the neighborhood's transformation firsthand. Morning coffee on the porch had become a neighborhood tradition of sorts. What began with my father sitting alone had evolved into an informal gathering place. Mrs. Abernathy often brought muffins. The Hernandez family's children played freely on adjacent lawns. Mr. Jenkins sometimes brought his guitar for impromptu music. The white patrol SUV was gone, replaced by people walking dogs or pushing strollers. Residents waved to each other. Gardens displayed personalized touches that would have earned violations weeks earlier. The court-appointed administrator had discovered even more financial improprieties than we had initially uncovered. Victor Harmon and 2 other board members now faced additional charges of embezzlement. Jeffrey Daniels had accepted a plea deal in exchange for testimony about the board's explicit instructions regarding intimidation tactics. Most importantly, the bylaws had been restored to their original intent: basic guidelines for maintaining property values and community standards without micromanaging residents' lives. On this particular morning, my father and I sat watching the sunrise, a peaceful ritual we had come to treasure. "I have to return home tomorrow," I told him. He nodded, understanding. "It has been good having you here despite the circumstances that extended your stay." "Do you regret any of it?" I asked. "Getting involved, I mean, you moved here for peace and quiet." My father considered the question seriously. "I regret not speaking up sooner," he finally said. "Systems fail when good people stay silent out of convenience or comfort." A young couple walked by with their toddler, waving cheerfully. My father returned the greeting with a genuine smile. "But no, I do not regret standing up when it mattered. Look around you." I did. Children were playing on a nearby lawn. An elderly man was tending flowers that definitely were not on the previous approved plants list. Laughter drifted from several directions, a sound that had been noticeably absent when I first arrived. "This is what community should be," my father continued. "Not uniform perfection enforced through fear, but human connection built on respect." A group of neighbors had organized a community picnic for the weekend. The newly formed HOA Transition Committee had approved it unanimously, a simple decision that would have been impossible under the previous regime. "Will you run for the new board?" I asked him. "Everyone respects you now that they know your background." He shook his head. "No, I served my time in leadership, but I will attend the meetings, offer suggestions when appropriate, and help ensure we never return to where we were." The morning sun cast long shadows across the lawn as neighbors began their day. No one hurried inside when vehicles passed. No one anxiously checked their gardens for violations. The invisible weight that had pressed down on Oak Ridge Estates had lifted. "You know what I realized through all this?" my father said, sipping his coffee thoughtfully. "What is that?" Real authority never needs to announce itself loudly. It does not require tactical pants or fake badges or threats. Real authority is recognized by its results. People feel safer, not more afraid. Communities grow stronger, not more divided. I thought about how he had handled the entire situation, with calm determination and methodical precision. He had not sought revenge or public vindication. He had simply stood firm when pushed and allowed the truth to emerge naturally. As we sat there, content in comfortable silence, The neighborhood around us continued its transformation. Not into some perfect, controlled environment where everyone lived by the same rigid standards, but into something far more valuable, a community of individuals who respected each other's differences while still caring for their shared spaces. My father had not come to Oak Ridge Estates planning to change it. He had simply wanted peace in retirement. But when forced to choose between quiet compliance and standing for what was right, he had proven that sometimes the most powerful statement is simply refusing to be intimidated. "More coffee?" he asked, rising from his chair. "Absolutely," I replied, realizing that some lessons about courage and integrity require no words at all.